Hi, this is Sean with the Emerald course in Module 4. In this particular example, we will be going over some sample reports and explaining the securitization process and showing some graphs and things of that nature, and also some screenshots from the terminal. I'll be showing parts of different reports and keying on some of the more important pieces of information of those reports. Just before I begin, I just would like to say that my name is Sean, and I am going over this information for educational entertainment purposes, and I am only the presenter of this information for this video. Thank you. Okay, and as you can see here in the first example, this is an example of a securitization audit report. There are different variations and different styles. Keep that in mind. The popular style nowadays is the ones with the screenshots in a certain flow. However, this is also a really good variation of the report. So this particular one, we will just be going down here, and as you can see, there's different aspects to the information. Obviously, it's going to be table of contents. It's going to show you the information for the borrower and things of that nature. And it shows you in different information. So, for example, if a loan has a particular entity involved, like this one here, it'll show that information here. Okay. This one actually had an example for basically some signature related issues here. This one here had some signature related issues here, as you can see, and there were some comparisons done in this particular report example here. And you see these sometimes on certain documentation where there is a signature issue or possibly robo-sign or things of that nature. We're going to be focusing more on the securitization. Okay, so as we move down here. And one of the good things about when you're looking at this information, keep in mind that obviously you want to see the holdings of the trust and the values. Like this one here, it shows you the assets held for this particular trust at the time, this report, or the example purposes, about $959 million. So this is a huge trust here, as you can see. And it just kind of breaks down some of the information relating to that. And as we scroll down here, and I wanted to key in on this graph here again, like the graph, I like to key in because it gives you a visual of what's going on. Let me zoom out there. So in this particular example, you see, and again, this is for example purposes. As you can see here, there's a flow here to the securitization, okay? And as you can see here, you have the original lender, okay? And you have a seller, okay? And you have a depositor, okay, and the certificate holders. And we've gone over this in the previous modules, okay? And in the middle here, okay, this is basically the securitization trust. And if you look at the example module for the screenshots, you'll see basically, one of the example modules in the course, you will see names like this similar. So you see in this particular one, you have, asset-backed certificates, 2007, with the dash. And so you have that's the kind of names that you will see. So just keep that in mind moving forward, okay? And, obviously the middle one here, that's going to be the securitization. And then you have the trustee here, okay? And then you have the custodian here in the middle. And this is an interesting example of one of the things that I mentioned in the previous modules. When you have, and we call these the transactional or transaction parties, right? When you have the different banks or lenders or financial companies playing different roles, right? So for example, like the trustee, the servicer, the underwriter, the depositor, the seller, the custodian. So in this example of this sample report, you will see that this particular bank is actually acting as a custodian and a trustee. So it's absorbed two different functions. And that's one of the things that I mentioned in a previous module. So keep that in mind, because that's one of the things that, as people read or look for information or do research, the question is, okay, well, who is the trustee? Who is the indenture trustee? Who is the custodian? Okay, well, yes, it could be different companies. It could be different lenders or banks. However, it could also be that one particular bank or lender or on the list of the transactional parties have absorbed multiple functions. Okay. So, in this case, you have this particular bank has absorbed the function of the custodian and the trustee. So it has two functions absorbed in it. Okay. So keep that in mind as well, because sometimes, people are like, wonder or they ask, oh, well, shouldn't the custodian and the trustee and the indentured trustee and the depositor, all be different? Well, in this example, not necessarily. So yes, that is a valid point to make. And many times you will see that the custodian, the trustee, the indentured trustee, the depositor, the seller, the underwriter are all different entities, companies. However, in some examples, you'll see that there will be one bank or two banks that absorb multiple functions. Okay, so one in this case, you're looking at the custodian and the trustee that have absorbed the function of this bank has absorbed the function of the custodian and the trustee, which are the functions of the securitization process, right? Of this process. Okay, so as you can see here again, you have a lender and you have a seller, okay, and then these loans are being flowed into the securitization trust, which is in the middle, okay? And then the payments, to the investors coming back, which are the certificate holders here along those lines, okay, it's coming back there, okay? And you see the master seller here, okay? So that's one of the things to keep in mind. And so that gives you the visual of the securitization process. And this here gives you like and you can pause this section and kind of look. And it tells you, like different, like the trustee performs fiduciary duties for the trust, the master servicer remits collection to the trust. These are all things that gives you the functions or the processes or what is actually happening there in detail. However, what you need to know is, is that there's a process to the securitization. Okay, it goes from the lender bank, to one institution, or it gets transferred or sold, or it gets securitized, and there's a process to it, and that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind when we're researching and learning about this area, along those lines. And here, this is parts of a trust that of the report that actually will give you like the links to the different parts of the trust and the documentation, things of that nature. And this here is showing you the sequence of the transactions, chain of title along those lines. And it shows you like, okay, there was a note, and then there was an endorsement, and from the originator to the originating lender to the seller, and then there was a seller to the depositor, and depositor to trustee. So this here, actually, when you look here in detail, okay, this gives you a flow. Okay, a flow of the securitization in a way you can more better understand from this angle. Okay, so when you look here, you obviously have the promissory note mentioned here. So the loan granted, right? So this particular lender originates the loan again for example purposes. Now, you have an endorsement from the original lender to the seller. Now, for those of you with a mortgage loan, I would recommend taking a look at your mortgage note, okay? Look at your mortgage note. It's usually about a 3-page document, sometimes 4 or 5 pages. It might have an allonge attached to it. And look to see if there is an endorsement or multiple endorsement paid to the order of. An endorsement is paid to the order of, or something along those lines at the end of the note, okay? It'll be either stamped or written, something like that. But look to see that, because you see that here, endorsement from the originating lender to the seller, okay? And then the endorsement from the seller to the depositor. Now, when you see seller to depositor, now we're getting into the trust, the securitization trust, okay? Because that's where CWABS is going to be the beginning of the trust name, okay? So now you're getting into seller to depositor, okay? And then an endorsement from the depositor to the trustee, okay? And that's what you're going to see. Because if we go back here, you see CWABS, this was the name of the trust here. And if you can pause there, you can see the name of it. I usually like to just say it for example purposes, I usually like to use fictional banks or fictional names. However, that gives you, that's the name of the trust. That's the name of the securitization trust. Okay. So when we go back to this section, when you see endorsement from the seller to the depositor and an endorser, and then CWABS as depositor endorsee. Okay. I know it's kind of technical. It could sound technical, but just keep in mind, it's basically telling you like, look, it's being sold, transferred, securitized into this. And this is just the technical lingo that kind of goes along with it, really. And here you see, okay, endorsement from depositor to trustee. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much the securitization process to get the loan in there in a nutshell. Okay. Now, some other things briefly want to touch on, because some of the items in this report are important to consider, especially in this course, and to get your knowledge familiar with certain terms. If you look at certain terms here, like the report itself, this sample variation has definitions, right? So when you look at a document, for example, which is called the deed of trust, like in California, you will have like a note and or a deed of trust. So a deed of trust would be the mortgage loan document, okay? So like, for example, a deed of trust, and you have definition, a secure transaction, security interest, okay? So here it says, and security interest is one of those important terms to really grasp and to learn. And see here it says, a security interest arises when in exchange for a loan, a borrower agrees in a security agreement that the lender, who is a secured party, may take specified collateral owned by the borrower if he or she should default on the loan. Okay. So basically saying like, look, here's a loan contract, right? Okay. And then the collateral, usually is the property, right? The property, the residential property, the home. Okay. So one of those key terms I'd recommend you look into is the security interest and also the secure transaction you see here. But security interest is one of the important ones, and so is secure transaction as well. Okay. And that's just a little tidbit that I'll throw in there for you guys. Okay. And this is going over as the beneficiary, those type of information. Okay. And then, we have the screenshots, which you can look at one of the example modules. Okay. And, the screenshots basically are, those screenshots that, if you check the example module, there's a more in-depth analysis of that. However, this basically would show you, more information relating to the trust. Like, for example, if this was a trust that there was a report being made on, it would be in this particular section of this variation of the report, and that will give you more information about the trust. Again, I'd take a look at the example module in the course that goes over this more in depth. And you have those screenshots there, okay? Now, the other sample, and this is a popular, obviously one of the more popular variations of the report, okay? And, obviously this is a sample, so some of the information has been blurred out here. However, you will get the idea. Now, we see here, again, the securitization, the participants, of course, the report, this is the information that the report gives you, with securitization of mortgage loans, auto loan, credit loans, business loans, personal loans, along those lines. You'll have, different participants, right? And that the graph that I showed you, right? That was along those lines as well, okay? And just going down here, this is just information relating to the search and some of the research so I'm trying to more focus on the actual securitization key points in this particular module here. And this is obviously the documentation relating to the trust. And you can see this is a big number here. Okay. This is telling you, general, the trust assets, things of that nature. Okay. And one of the good thing about this variation of the report is that you'll have highlighted in pieces of information, like you'll have a highlight here about something that is important to look into or to kind of focus on in a way when you have these reports. Okay. And again, this is one of the areas I obviously want to show with the graph because it gives you a visual. And this obviously is this particular company here. And you can see it's again, you see the flow, okay, the flow of the securitization, the flow of securitizing the debt, transferring around, and what happens. And you have here the borrower, okay, then you have the lender here, okay, and then you have the MBS, the mortgage-backed security here. Let me zoom in here. And then you have the investors, and then the money flows back. You see, so this kind of gives you, and on the left-hand side here, this gives you more of an example of how the money is flowing in a visual way, more of a simple way, but a way that you can understand, right? Because if you look at the example module, it kind of goes into some of the investor side, right? And some of the, when looking at a screenshot, seeing some of the information relating to that aspect or that part of it. Because you see here, it says investors. Well, investors are investing into these securitization trusts and making dividends, and interest is being produced right off of the trust. So there's a side to this there's another side. There's an investment side, okay? Um, and like the securitization trust will have ratings, right? Like they'll have a AAA rating or a different type of rating. Well, they have that rating for many reasons, but one of the reasons obviously is these investors, when they're interested in investing in the trust, then that's one of the things where they're like, okay, well, if this securitization trust has a high rating, it's a producing trust, and that that's the other side of it where they're investing into it, and then there's more money being made. So here you kind of get that idea here, okay? And on the right-hand side, you kind of get an idea of the mortgage, and the securitization and the MBS trust and coming back here. So there's a flow here. But really, with the visual, the idea is to get that, the idea of what is happening. Well, there's obviously money flowing, there's securitization and there's flowing, at different angles. So that's really the lesson here. And feel free to pause and look through this as well. And here's another very good graph as well, okay? And this one actually has a step-by-step analysis in these boxes, as you can see here, okay? And, it will actually tell you, okay, step one, there's a borrower obtains a loan from the lender, okay? And then here it says the lender sells the loan to the issuer, and the borrower begins making monthly payments to the servicer. Step three, the issuer, keep that in mind, sells securities to the investors. The underwriter assists in the sale. The rating agency rates the securities, and the credit enhancement may be obtained. Step four, the servicer collects monthly payments from the borrower and remits payments to the issuer. The servicer and the trustee manage delinquent loans according to terms set forth in the pooling and service agreement. So that's very important there. Okay, step four, and feel free to pause the video and look at that section there, step four box. And so as you can see here, you have the investor, you have the lender, the servicers, okay, and the flow. There's a flow. And here it tells you the custodian and the different, other labels here, the different other transactional parties relating to the securitization. And here is a prospectus supplement. This is a screenshot, of the supplement. And this one here, I will zoom in. This is actually a very good one to look at for the sake of the CUSIP numbers here. Now, this one here, actually, when you look in this particular section here, okay, I'm zooming in here. This one will actually have, this one actually has a set of CUSIP numbers listed here, okay? So here you have like a set of them. There's a set of CUSIP numbers listed. So that's very important to note. Earlier on in the modules, I was explaining that, as you know, the CUSIP number, there's a master CUSIP number that identifies the main securitization trust, and then there's the minor ones as well. The minor ones will identify either different parts of the trust or other things, but typically I've seen that it will, based on the research, will identify different parts of the trust, but there's other functions to it as well. But that's just from my experience, what I've seen from my database research days. And yeah, and that's, in a nutshell, what that basically the securitization process is. And again, these are the screenshots, okay? And again, there's an example module that you can look at that explains this more in depth, okay? And sometimes you'll have highlighted boxes that'll show you specific key pieces of information or important pieces of information as well, okay? And just going on the third and final sample here. This one actually was an auto loan one, okay? And as you can see here, same idea, same concept. We have the transactional participants here. Okay, servicer, seller, creditor, agreement type, price, things of that nature. There you have examples of the contract. And you have the securitization participants here, the sponsor, the seller, the depositor, servicer, the note trustee, security trustee, issuing entity, okay? And here we have a screenshot of the prospectus. As you can see, this is a big number here, okay? And this is the prospectus. Now, this is showing you on this particular page, it's showing you the issuing entity. Okay, we're moving to that. Okay, when we were showing some of the graphs and things along those lines, the depositor, the originator, servicer, sponsor, and administrator, the indentured trustee, and the owner trustee, okay? And this is showing also the asset representations, the cutoff and the closing date. Now, one of the things about the cutoff and the closing date, one of the things you will note, and this is important, is typically, with like, for example, with mortgages, there is usually like a 90-day window, okay? So, these will be outlined in the prospectus. So, there could be variations. However, as a general rule, for example purposes, it'll say, in the prospectus, or, there could be, or the SEC guidelines, along those lines, it'll say something like, for example purposes, again, let's just say, okay, if this particular trust is going to securitize a mortgage loan, then, for example, the securitization, the transferring of that note or that debt into the securitization trust should be done within 90 days, okay? For example. So now what that means is that basically from the funding date, the origination date, okay, that loan is funded, okay, the origination date, the funding date, now, along those lines, now, it has to be, in order for that to be properly securitized based on the regulations, based on the rules, okay? It needs to be securitized within 90 days, okay, into the trust. So that's where the cutoff and the closing dates come in. Okay, that's why that's important. And that's one of those things that, like if there are variations in them securitizing, like let's say they did not make the cutoff date, or they did not put the securitization debt in there, or the note in there properly, then that's something that that is brought up, right, and in a legal capacity, right, in some cases in the past. And those are the things that you guys can look up. But yeah, that's going to be roughly what that cutoff and closing date means. So just keep that in mind. There are rules to securitization. There are SEC guidelines. So even as a large securitization trust, securitizing mortgage notes, that is monetizing, there are still rules and regulations. So, and that's what happens, and that's why it's important to have a report that will show that in a sense, or will mention it, based on the research. So that is why that is important. But really, that's where the cutoff and the closing date actually come in, okay? And here is an interesting excerpt from the document. This is basically saying, like, on the closing date, right? There's a purchase agreement, okay? So it says on the closing date, NMAC will sell and assign to the depositor without recourse pursuant to a purchase agreement, the purchase agreement, its entire interest in the receivables, including the security interests, or we mentioned that earlier, including the security interest in the financed vehicles. On the closing date, the depositor will transfer and assign to the issuing entity without recourse pursuant to the sale and service agreement its entire interest in the receivables constituting the receivables pool, including its security interest in the related finance vehicle. Okay. So this is important too, and this is why this is highlighted, So this is basically going over the interest in the receivables, okay, the security interest in the finance vehicles, the closing date, what the depositor will do to the, transfer and assign to the issuing entity. And again, it's saying pursuant to the sale and service agreement. Okay, so it's going back and referencing a sale and service agreement, its entire interest in the receivables. Okay, so again, see, these are tidbits or excerpts that are important too, that relates to the securitization process. Okay, and here is another highlighted piece of information as well. And again, you have the screenshots from the terminal. This is a bond summary here, okay? And there's an example module that goes over this in depth for other trusts so that you get an idea of what some of this information means, okay? And this is obviously a very important and a good piece of the report, which is showing you the chain of title. So here is basically a flow, right? It's showing you, okay, the buyer, the seller, it's showing you the creditor, originator, the master servicer, the underwriter, and it's showing you the flow. And it says here in the highlighted yellow here, the note was split from the agreement. The note was assigned and transferred. So this is all key pieces of information. Okay, you have, in this example, for example purposes, a splitting of the note from the agreement, and then the note is then assigned and transferred. So that's very important key pieces of information as it relates to the flow of the debt, as it relates to the securitization. As you can see, there's a lot, going on here as far as the flow and with the graphs and the, how it's being flowed and how the process works. And yeah, that is the fourth module. Thank you. I definitely recommend taking a look at the example modules after watching this video. And I thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.